There's a moment that almost nobody talks about. It was sometime in early 2026, and a report quietly surfaced, not in a royal biography, not in a leaked memo, but in the entertainment press. Netflix, the company that handed Harry and Meghan $100 million to tell their story, was reportedly in conversations about bringing William and Kate into the fold. Let that sit for a second. The same platform. The one that aired Harry looking into a camera and describing his brother grabbing him by the collar. The one that let Meghan explain, in her own words, how the institution failed her. That platform is now circling the people they were talking about. And William didn't pitch himself. He didn't call anyone. He didn't post anything, announce anything, or hint at anything. He just existed, quietly, with dignity, for years. While the world watched his brother build a media empire out of their family's pain, and William did nothing. Nothing turned out to be the most powerful move on the board. This is the story of how a man who never gave an interview, never explained himself, never fought back in public, ended up in the strongest position of anyone in this entire saga. This is the story of how silence beat the machine, and why that should make all of us a little uncomfortable about what we've been watching. Because here's the thing about Netflix, and here's the thing about all of us who watch it. Netflix is not in the business of stories. Netflix is in the business of attention. And attention follows a very specific pattern. It chases novelty, then intimacy, then the moment when the curtain finally drops on something that felt untouchable. Harry and Meghan understood this early. They offered novelty, a royal couple walking away from the institution. They offered intimacy, cameras in their home, tears on screen, confessions that the palace would never have sanctioned. And for a while, it worked spectacularly. The 2022 documentary didn't just get watched. It got talked about, dissected, argued over, played on repeat in living rooms and on phones and in opinion columns for months. It was, by any metric, a content event. Not just a documentary, an event. But here's what nobody tells you about content events. They have a half-life. The more intimate you go, the faster the audience processes you and moves on. Harry and Meghan gave everything in 2022. Then came Spare in 2023. Then more interviews. Then more projects. And with each one, the return diminished. Not because the audience stopped caring about the royals, they never stopped caring about the royals, but because Harry and Meghan had already shown everything. There was no more curtain to pull back. The intimacy was spent. Netflix knows this. They have the data. They can see exactly when engagement peaks and when it starts to slide. And by 2025, the slide was visible enough that when the new deal was announced, the extension, the continuation of the partnership, the language around it was noticeably different. Looser, less grand. The $100 million era had a different energy than what came after. Something had shifted. And on the other side of that shift, completely unbothered, was William. If you followed this story for any length of time, and if you're watching this, you probably built up a certain image of William in your head. The rigid one. The institutional one. The brother who wouldn't pick up the phone, wouldn't extend the olive branch, wouldn't bend. The one who let pride get in the way of family. That's the version of events that dominated the narrative for years, and honestly, it wasn't entirely unfair. But here's what that reading missed entirely. William wasn't being rigid. William was being invisible. And invisibility, in the attention economy, is the rarest and most valuable thing you can possess. Think about what he did, or rather, what he didn't do. He didn't respond to the documentary. When his brother sat in front of a camera and described their relationship breaking down, William said nothing publicly. When Spare came out with details that would make most people reach for their phone and fire off a statement, William said nothing. When interviewers asked, his team deflected. When the tabloids speculated, they got nothing to work with. He became, in media terms, a black hole. And black holes are fascinating. You can't look away from them precisely because you can't see into them. Every single thing William withheld became something the audience wanted. Every silence created a question. Every non-response generated 10 articles trying to decode what the non-response meant. He was producing enormous amounts of public interest while producing zero content. Do you understand how difficult that is to do in 2026? In a world where everyone, every celebrity, every public figure, every brand is trained to feed the machine constantly, to post and respond and engage and clarify, William just didn't, and it made him magnetic. If you're finding this breakdown useful, and I think you are, because this is not the version of this story you've seen anywhere else, hit subscribe. This channel is where the royal narrative gets pulled apart properly. Not just what happened, but why it happened, and what it tells us about power. Because the power dynamics here are genuinely fascinating, and they're about to get more complicated. Because William didn't do this alone. Kate understood something that almost nobody in her position has ever understood, and she understood it before William did, before the palace did, before any of their advisors did. She understood that in the modern media landscape, the most powerful position is not the loudest voice in the room. It's the one everyone is trying to hear. Go back to 2020, to 2021, to the period right after Harry and Meghan left, when the press was hungry and the public was picking sides. Kate showed up. She did her engagements, she smiled at the right moments, she wore the right things, she was, by every traditional measure, doing her job. But she was also doing something else. She was building a reserve. A reservoir of public goodwill so deep, so consistent, so carefully maintained, that when the moment came that she would need it, it would be there. And then the moment came, and it was nothing like anyone expected. When Kate disappeared from public view in early 2024, the internet did what the internet does. It speculated, it theorized, it generated an almost embarrassing volume of content about her absence. Conspiracy theories, edits, analysis, think pieces. She became, without doing anything at all, the most talked about person on the planet for weeks. And then she came back, on her own terms, in a video she controlled, with a message she wrote, announcing her cancer diagnosis with a composure that stopped people mid-scroll. That moment, that single, self-produced, unmediated moment, did something to public perception that no documentary, no interview, no Netflix deal could have manufactured. It made her real. Not royal real, human real. The kind of real that makes people feel protective of someone they've never met. And here is where it connects directly to Netflix. Netflix doesn't just buy access, Netflix buys narrative potential. They look at a subject and ask, is there somewhere left to go with this person? Is there a chapter that hasn't been told? Is there an audience that would show up, not out of habit, but out of genuine hunger to know more? With Harry and Meghan, by 2025, the honest answer to that question was becoming increasingly difficult to make compelling. Not because their story isn't interesting, it is, but because they had told so much of it already, so publicly, so repeatedly, that the mystery was gone. And mystery is the engine of long-form documentary content. You watch because you want to understand something you don't yet understand. Once you feel like you understand it, or once you feel like you've been given the version they want you to understand, the pull weakens. Kate is the opposite of that. Kate, right now, is almost entirely mystery. We know the surface. We know the clothes and the children and the engagements and the carefully worded statements. But we don't know what she thinks about what happened with Harry. We don't know what she said to William on the nights when this family drama was at its worst. We don't know how she actually felt sitting across from a world that was consuming a documentary about people calling her cold. We don't know any of it, because she never told us. And that is worth more to a streaming platform than anything money can buy. That is years of content potential sitting completely untapped. Now, and this is crucial, none of this means Kate is going to sign a Netflix deal. That's not the point. The point is that she has structured her public presence, whether consciously or not, in a way that makes her the most valuable unmonetized narrative in the entire royal ecosystem. She has protected her story so completely that it has become precious. Rare. The thing everyone wants and nobody has been given. William did the same. Think about it from a pure content perspective. What do we actually know about how William experienced the last 6 years? What do we know about what it felt like to read Spare? What do we know about the conversations that didn't happen, the phone calls that went unanswered, the birthdays that passed in silence? We know almost nothing, because William gave us nothing. And giving nothing, it turns out, is a form of power that Harry, despite all his savviness about media, despite Meghan's background in the industry, despite the entire apparatus they built around Archewell, never quite grasped. You cannot manufacture mystery after you've already explained everything. You cannot make yourself rare after you've made yourself constantly available. This is the trap. And it's a trap worth understanding, because it's not just about royals, it's about how attention works, how value gets assigned in a world where everyone is competing for the same eyeballs. The more you give, the more is expected. And the more is expected, the more you have to give. Until one day you look up and realize you've handed over everything, every private moment, every family wound, every vulnerability, and the audience has processed it, moved on, and is already looking for the next thing. William and Kate never started that cycle, and that's exactly why the next thing might be them. Stay with me, because this last part is where it gets genuinely uncomfortable. Let's talk about what this actually means for Harry and Meghan. Because I want to be precise here, because this is where most people get it wrong. This is not about Harry losing a family argument. This is not about Meghan being outplayed in some personal rivalry with Kate. Those framings are too small for what's actually happening. What's happening is something colder and more structural than a family feud. Harry and Meghan are being displaced not by people who fought them, but by people who simply waited. Think about what it takes to process that, if you're Harry. You left. You gave up the institution, the titles and practice, the proximity to your father and your brother, and the country you grew up in. You made the bet that the story you had to tell was worth more than the position you were leaving behind. And for a while, genuinely, for a while, that bet looked right. The documentary numbers were real. The global attention was real. The cultural conversation you sparked was real. But the institution you walked away from kept existing. And the people in it kept doing what they do, showing up, staying quiet, protecting their narrative, building something slowly that doesn't peak and crash, but accumulates. And now, the platform that was supposed to be yours, the one that represented your independence, your voice, your ability to exist outside the palace on your own terms, is reportedly looking at the people you left as its next major asset. That is not a small thing to sit with. And here's the part that makes this story genuinely tragic rather than just strategically interesting. Harry didn't do any of this cynically. That's what most people miss when they frame him as calculating or manipulative. The grief over his mother was real. The frustration with the institution was real. The feeling of being trapped in a role he didn't choose and couldn't reshape from within, that was real. He told his story because he needed to tell it, because holding it in had cost him, visibly, for years. But need and strategy are different things. And the media landscape doesn't reward need. It rewards positioning. It rewards the ability to stay in control of your own narrative, not by flooding it with information, but by rationing it so precisely that the audience is always leaning forward, always wanting slightly more than they're being given. William never needed to tell his story publicly. Or if he needed to, and he's human so maybe part of him did, he found another way to process it. He absorbed the public silence as a cost of the position. And that discipline, that containment, has compounded over 6 years into something that looks, from the outside, like an unassailable strategic advantage. Kate absorbed it too. She sat with a cancer diagnosis in private for months, while the world invented increasingly wild explanations for her absence. And when she finally spoke, she controlled every single element of how that story reached the public. No intermediary, no journalist, no platform with editing rights. Just her, a camera, a garden, and words she chose herself. That is the opposite of a Netflix fly-on-the-wall documentary. That is someone who understands, at the deepest level, that the moment you hand someone else the camera, you lose control of what the camera sees. Harry and Meghan handed Netflix the camera in 2022, and the footage was extraordinary, raw and emotional and genuinely revealing in ways that royal content had never been before. But the camera kept rolling, and the deal kept going, and with every new project, every new appearance, every new interview given to a platform or publication that then shaped the story in its own interest, a little more control transferred away from them and toward the machine. William and Kate never gave the machine anything to work with, And so the machine is coming to them now, hat in hand, because they are the last great untold story in the most watched family on Earth. Will they take the deal? Almost certainly not. Not in any form that resembles what Harry and Meghan did. That's not who they are, and more importantly, it's not who they need to be. Their power right now comes precisely from not being available in that way. The moment they open the door to a fly-on-the-wall camera, they become what the Sussexes became: content. And content has a shelf life. But here's the final thought I want to leave you with, and I think this is the most important one. We talk about this as if William won and Harry lost, as if there's a scoreboard somewhere and we're watching the final result come in. But that framing flattens something that's actually more complicated and more human than a competition. What William did, the silence, the discipline, the years of absorbing public narrative attacks without responding, that came at a cost too. We just don't know what it is because he never told us. We don't know what 6 years of this has done to him privately. We don't know what he said to Kate in the moments when the weight of it was hardest. We don't know what he feels about his father's illness, about the time that's passing, about the brother he grew up with becoming someone he reads about in the news rather than talks to on the phone. We don't know any of it. And that total, complete, impenetrable unknowing is exactly why the cameras want in. The door is closed, the lights are off, and everybody wants to know what's happening inside. That's not victory. That's not defeat. That's just what it looks like when a family becomes a story and then has to decide, every single day, whether to stay a story or try to become a family again. And if you've made it to the end of this video, you already know which one is harder. If this landed differently than the royal content you usually watch, that's what this channel is here for. Subscribe, leave a comment with where you think this goes next, because I genuinely read them, and I'll see you in the next